Hey, world history. Welcome to U13-L2. What is imperialism? Okay, so this actually ended up being one of my more favorite units of this whole year. When I first learned about imperialism, I was so confused and lost. Like, I hated learning about imperialism. But now that I teach it, it's actually really interesting. So I hope that you find at least something interesting out of this unit. Well, I guess I hope that with all the units, but especially this one. So, what to expect in Unit 13? So, we are right here on U13L2. What is imperialism? Then we have imperialism in India and imperialism in Africa. Both of those are videos that I make. Then U13L5, African Women Primary Source Reading. That's a reading about firsthand account of the effects of imperialism. Then we have U13L6, King Leopold II. That is a Edpuzzle video that you'll answer the questions, and I'll be grading you on what questions to get right or wrong. Then U13L7, the US's role in imperialism. This one is honestly one of my more longer videos that I make, but it's not just me talking the whole time. I have like some TED Ed videos that I put in between when I'm speaking. So you don't have to listen to my voice the entire time, but it is actually a very critical lesson to do in order to understand the Unit 13 News Reporter summative. So make sure you are like paying attention to that lesson. Learning targets. Describe European imperialism and explain the effects on interactions with colonized peoples in Africa and Asia. Your job. You're going to watch this Edpuzzle, answer the questions. Anything in blue text, there's going to be questions that I want you to answer directly on the Edpuzzle. Anything in red text is going to be a vocab word, so make sure you're following along with your study guide. Okay, first question for you. What do you know about imperialism? Or what do you think of when you hear imperialism? All right, honestly, when I was in high school, I didn't know much about imperialism, but we're going to learn a lot about it this unit. So, heads up, this unit does talk about some more deep topics like slavery, which we also talked about last unit, genocide and human mutilation. Um, some pictures might be like very slightly graphic. They're not like bloody and gory and gross. I'm pretty good about giving a heads up when those images come up, but if you have any questions, just let me know. So, what is imperialism? This is an important definition since this is the whole topic for Unit 13. So, imperialism is the idea of one country takes over another territory in order to exploit that territory for its labor and or natural resources. So, it is also the dominating country, controls the territory's politics, economy, and social life. And the domination of territory is done either through harsh military tactics or economic tactics. We'll see examples of both of those. So, you're probably like, "Wait a minute. Haven't we like seen many countries and kingdoms and empires do this throughout history, like this whole class that we've taken?" Yeah, that's correct. Imperialism has been around since humans have been around. So, here are some examples of imperialism throughout history. For example, you have the Mongols, we talked about them last semester. Then we have the Roman Empire. We talked about that a lot last semester. We have Alexander the Great. He was right before the Roman Empire. We talked about him briefly. You might also think of US history. So, imperialism with the British coming over, taking over this part of what we know now as the United States, making 13 colonies. That is imperialism. So, you're probably like, wait a minute, what's the difference between imperialism and colonialism? Good question. They are extremely similar. So let's talk about the one difference. So imperialism is the economic, political, and or social idea of taking over another country. Colonialism is the physical building of colonies and the physical action of dominating that territory. So imperialism is more of like the idea of it, as colonialism is the physical part of it. So, for example, under British imperialism, the 13 colonies were built by the British in Eastern North America. So, imperialism, that's the idea. Colonies or colonialism, that's the physical part of it. So, imperialism has happened throughout history. But for this unit, we're going to just focus on about the 1800s till the 1940s. So, the start of imperialism in the 1800s. There are two main reasons that imperialism really grew in the 1800s. The first reason was because European competition with other European countries, and the second was social Darwinism, which we learned about last unit. That is where Europeans thought they were superior. So this political cartoon is a very famous cartoon in the imperialism era. So as you can see here, this kind of like pie is supposed to be China. And then around here, we have a bunch of European leaders, and they have knives. Like they're kind of fighting over what chunk of the pie they get or what chunk of China they get. Now, you'll also see over here, this is supposed to be a representation of Japan. Japan also had a lot to do with imperialism. We'll talk about that more when we do our World War I, World War II unit. All right, so let's talk about the competition side of this. So, in the early 1800s, slave trade was made illegal in European countries and the United States. Kind of the little asterisk by the United States is that the US still had slaves that were in the United States, but no more people from Africa could be stolen and imported into the United States, although slavery existed in the United States until the 1865 at the end of the Civil War. So merchants were also out there looking for new commodities to sell since the slave trade kind of took a big dive. So they turned their attention to areas with smaller governments or no European influences. So places like that would be parts of Africa, specifically not like on the Ivory Coast, like we talked about. Was the last unit or the unit before? Wow. Southeast Asia, India, Australia, and then later on to Latin and South America. So European countries were in competition with each other. They wanted the cheapest labor, and they also wanted the most expensive goods to trade, because the more money one would get, the more power that country would get. So ivory is one of those commodities that was very popular to trade during this era. Also, more land meant that there would be more natural resources to exploit. One of the most famous resources to exploit would be rubber. Now, rubber traditionally comes from the sap of a rubber tree. Now, today, most rubber items are like synthetic rubber, so probably made out of like some sort of oil or petroleum or something like that. But so if you're wondering, like, why is there a picture of a tree? Yeah, that's a rubber tree right here. There's also things like metals like copper, tin, gold, aluminum, rubber trees, lumber, cotton farmland, ivory, which is animal tusks, diamonds, and opioids, specifically in China. So, resources from these colonies would be shipped back to the colonizers' European factories. Those factory workers would make the final good. Those goods would be then sold to the global economy, which meant profits for the European colonizers. So here's an example of that. So in Congo, those Africans would be unwillingly extract rubber from the rubber trees. This rubber would then be sent to the factories in Belgium, which is located in Europe. And then those factory workers would make it into water-resistant clothes, shoes, tires, especially for bikes and later on cars, as well as machinery belts. We also have nationalism. So that's when people's greatest loyalty should not be with the king or the queen. Instead, they should be loyal to the nation of the people or have a shared common culture and history. So when I say nation of the people, that doesn't necessarily mean a country. It could mean a country, but it could also mean more like smaller populations within a country that maybe those people would share that common culture or history. Also, nationalism believed that the country's common culture should be spread amongst the world. So this really led to colonies around the world spreading those European cultures. I mean, for example, you can look at the United States. That was a colony, and it was first established by the British, especially those 13 colonies. The British speak English. Here in the United States, the majority of people speak English as well. So still connecting to the present day. There's also social Darwinism. So we talked about this last unit. And that again is the false belief that some people were born better than others, making them superior. Those who were seen by society as being born into status and wealth meant that they had more wealth and success, and they were clearly superior to others. Although this is a very false belief, like we talked about last unit. Also, Europeans falsely believed that their white race was superior to all other races. This led to racism, which is the belief that one race is superior to others. So here's kind of my little example about social Darwinism. Now, I don't know if this actually happened or not, but I try to think of examples because sometimes things are hard to comprehend. So, in European leaders and wealthy minds, this belief was their justification to colonizing and exploiting Africans, Indians, Australians, and Asians in Southeast Asia. So, let's pretend we have like Queen Victoria, and she's like, I have a superior military, technology, and ways of extracting precious natural resources, and I'm going to colonize you, India. And India's like, no, screw you. We don't want your help. And then Queen Victoria would be like, well, that's just too bad. I want your goods and labor. So then the English army would come in and invade India, and violence and oppression of the native Indians would ensue. That's my little example there. All right, so another aspect of social Darwinism is that the Europeans believed it was their duty to colonize and modernize non European territories. They also falsely believed Europeans were born with stronger bodies and were smarter. Again, that all ties back with social Darwinism and those pseudosciences, like we talked about last unit. So there are a lot of like political cartoons during this era as well. You will see Uncle Sam a lot. He usually represents the United States. So for example, in this one here, you will see that it's Uncle Sam. He's standing tall with the American flag draping over Cuba, like trying to protect Cuba from the other colonizers. So, imperialism and technology. So, did the territories who got threatened by imperialism ever fight back? Did they ever go, oh my gosh, no, we don't want to be like colonized, we're going to fight? Yeah, that did happen a lot. And specifically, we'll talk about the Zulu and the Boer War later on. Now, was it successful? No. There's only one exception where there was actually a fight back against the European countries that was successful, and that would be Menelik II of Ethiopia. Otherwise, Europeans always won. So why? Why were the Europeans so dominant? The reason for that is they had more superior war technology. One of those technologies would be called something the Maxim gun. And it was invented in 1884. It was the first automatic machine gun, which if you look here, you're like, wait a minute, that's just like a cannon with a gun attached to it. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And it was able to kill and inflict fear on mass groups of people. Now, during imperialism, so from the 1800s to about the 1940s here, the steam engine became very popular. So here's a question. How would the steam engine be helpful to colonizers in exploiting the land and labor force? Now, don't Google it, and no, I don't know. Just give me your best educated guess. All right, so it's an engine, right? Kind of like the engines we have in our car. So it was used to provide quicker transportation, just like today. It was also used in trains, cable cars, like for mining, and steamboats. And Europeans were able to navigate waterways both upstream and downstream. Also, steam engines were used in trains. So the building of railroad tracks would go deep into the jungles and forests. Ships would ship supplies to and from the colonies, and also transport any armies if there was an uprising. All right, let's wrap this up for today. We've learned about imperialism, colonialism, nationalism, and a bit more about social Darwinism. Next up, you're going to watch U13-L3 and puzzle about imperialism in India. And if you have any questions, comments, or want to learn more, let us know. We are happy to answer. Thanks for watching. Bye.